Imagine your home engulfed in flames. And when the smoke clears, 5 of your children are simply gone. On Christmas Eve 1945 in Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family gathered to celebrate the holiday in joy. George and Jennie Sodder had 10 children, and that night most were awake, excited by gifts and holiday cheer. The younger children hung stockings, while older siblings prepared for bedtime after hours of laughter and food. The house was warm with Christmas lights, but outside, snow fell across the quiet hills of Appalachia. Just after midnight, the telephone rang unexpectedly, and Jennie answered a strange call from a woman asking for a man unknown. The caller laughed oddly, voices muttered in the background, and the line clicked dead, leaving Jennie unsettled. Moments later, Jennie noticed the house unusually quiet, some children asleep upstairs while others lingered awake. George and his sons had locked the doors and gone to bed, unaware that something sinister was unfolding. At 1 a.m., Jennie awoke again, startled by the sound of something hitting the roof and rolling down. She dismissed it as perhaps snow or a branch, not realizing it might be the spark of disaster to come. At 1:30 a.m., Jennie awoke once more, this time to the smell of smoke filling her bedroom. Rushing to the hallway, she saw flames crawling up the walls near the children's room upstairs. Panicked, Jennie screamed for George and the older children, who bolted awake to the nightmare unfolding. George shouted for the children, but smoke and fire spread rapidly, cutting off escape routes in seconds. The family scrambled in chaos, pulling some of the children from their beds to flee outside. Flames consumed the stairwell, preventing access to the bedrooms where 5 younger children remained trapped. George attempted to climb upstairs but was driven back by blistering heat and choking smoke. Jennie screamed their names: Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty, but no voices answered. Within minutes, the Sodder house was a furnace, each second closing chances of survival. George ran outside barefoot in the snow, desperate to rescue his children still trapped inside. He attempted to climb the exterior wall but blistered his hands on scorching siding. George sprinted to his work trucks to use as ladders, only to find both trucks mysteriously disabled. The family ladder, always leaned against the house, was missing entirely that night. Every attempt at rescue failed, as if unseen forces had sabotaged every possibility. Neighbors rushed to help, but by the time anyone could act, the home was fully engulfed. The family stood outside in horror, forced to watch flames consume the second floor. Within 45 minutes, the house collapsed into glowing embers, leaving nothing but ashes and silence. The Sodder family had escaped with 5 children alive, but the other 5 were presumed lost. Yet something about the fire felt wrong too. Fast, too complete, too mysterious. The fire department, delayed until the next morning, arrived to sift through the smoldering ruins. To everyone's shock, no remains of the 5 missing children were found in the ashes. Experts insisted even in a house fire, bones should remain, but here there were none. Jennie tested this herself later, burning bones of animals and discovering they never vanished completely. Her suspicion grew that the children had not perished in the flames at all. Witnesses began whispering of strange men watching the Sodder home in days before the fire. One neighbor recalled seeing someone cut the family's telephone wires just before the blaze. Another claimed to have seen a man with a strange object on the roof that very night. Jennie's memory of something hitting the roof suddenly seemed less like chance and more like intention. The Sodder parents realized too many coincidences surrounded their tragedy. Authorities were quick to declare the case closed. The children had died in the fire, yet George and Jennie refused to accept this explanation, demanding proof of remains. Investigators offered none, shrugging off the missing bones as burned too completely. But experts later confirmed a blaze of that size could not destroy bones entirely. Doubt spread quickly through the community, dividing belief between accident and something darker. That Christmas, the Sodder home was gone, 5 children vanished, and no clear answers given. Jennie refused to give up hope, believing her children had been taken rather than lost to fire. George agreed, his anger fueling years of private investigations into the mystery. From that moment forward, the Sodder case shifted from tragedy to one of America's strangest disappearances. Rumors of kidnapping began swirling before the ashes even cooled. Friends reported sightings of a strange car parked near the Sodder home that night. Others claimed men had been watching the family in the weeks leading up to the fire. Some believed George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini and the Italian Mafia made him a target. Was the fire an accident or deliberate retaliation by powerful enemies? Too many unanswered questions haunted the Sodders as they rebuilt their lives in ruins. George and Jennie's surviving children carried trauma, remembering the chaos of fire and the silence upstairs. The family vowed to seek answers for the rest of their lives, no matter the cost. The fire left not only ashes but a mystery that would consume decades of searching. It was no longer just about tragedy. It had become about justice, truth, and proof. The case demanded deeper investigation than authorities seemed willing to provide. For George, each failed attempt at rescue replayed endlessly in his mind. For Jennie, the memory of unanswered screams haunted every night that followed. Yet hope remained, a fragile belief their children still lived, somewhere beyond their reach. This belief fueled the family to challenge official conclusions for decades, and so the Sodder story became not an ending but a chilling beginning. Fayetteville was divided. Some pitied the Sodders' grief, while others whispered they clung to false hope. Officials dismissed further inquiry, frustrated by the family's refusal to accept closure. But evidence continued to contradict the official narrative of death by fire. The missing ladder, the disabled trucks, and cut phone lines begged investigation. Instead, authorities seemed determined to bury questions with ashes. Jennie began writing letters, begging experts for insight into fires and human remains. Each response confirmed her suspicion. Bones should have survived. Her conviction hardened into certainty her children were not lost to flames. George turned to private investigators, seeking evidence of foul play. The search for truth became their life's mission. The Sodders could not rebuild without answers, and so their grief turned into obsession. They demanded law enforcement reopen the case, but officials refused. Neighbors whispered of corruption, conspiracy, and secrets the authorities would not reveal. The Sodder family turned to the press, hoping national attention would force answers. Their case soon spread beyond West Virginia, capturing headlines across America. The story gripped the nation. 5 children vanished into fire with no trace, no bones, and no proof. Public fascination grew, with some offering theories and others claiming first-hand sightings. Letters poured in with reports of children resembling the Sodder siblings. The mystery took on a life of its own, far larger than Fayetteville. For George and Jennie, each clue offered a spark of hope amid despair. The haunting reality was clear. 5 children had gone missing in plain sight on Christmas Eve. Whether taken by enemies, strangers, or something more sinister, no one could prove. The Sodder fire was no ordinary tragedy. It was the beginning of a legend. A case so strange it blurred the line between crime, conspiracy, and folklore. And for decades it would remain one of the darkest unsolved mysteries in America. The fire destroyed their home but ignited a mystery that would last generations. The Sodders' refusal to accept the official story ensured the case would never die. With every unanswered question, the legend of the Sodder children grew stronger. And so part 1 ends, leading into part 2, the chilling truth of the missing 5. For what vanishes in fire may not always be lost to flames, but to shadows. When dawn broke over Fayetteville on Christmas morning, the Sodders faced the unthinkable. 5 children were missing. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty had vanished from the upper floor of their family home during the fire. The flames had reduced the house to ash, yet not a single trace of the missing siblings was found. Firefighters combed through smoldering debris, expecting to find charred remains or bone fragments. Instead, they found nothing, not even a tooth, not even a fragment of clothing. Officials quickly declared the children dead, attributing their disappearance to the intense heat of the fire. But George and Jennie refused to accept such a conclusion, insisting it defied both science and common sense. Even in the hottest house fires, bones, teeth, and remains almost always survive in some form. Crematorium operators confirmed it requires hours at extremely high temperatures to fully reduce bones to ash. The Sodder home fire lasted less than an hour, far too brief to obliterate 5 entire bodies. This glaring contradiction planted seeds of suspicion in the hearts of the grieving parents. Jennie tested the theory herself, burning bones in her stove, proving they would never vanish completely. The lack of remains became the cornerstone of the Sodders' refusal to accept their children had died. To them, it was not tragedy but evidence of a darker, deliberate crime hidden behind the fire. The idea that their children had been kidnapped, not killed, became a terrifying possibility. Survivors recalled haunting details from that night. John Sodder claimed he tried to wake his siblings but could not get them out before smoke overwhelmed him. George J.R.B. remembered his father frantically searching for the ladder and coal trucks that would not start. Marion, the eldest daughter, tried to comfort her parents but could not erase their guilt and fear. Each survivor carried trauma, their memories tangled with unanswered questions about what really happened. Investigators pointed to faulty wiring as the cause of the fire, but George rejected this immediately. He had recently had the home's wiring inspected, and the electrician assured him it was safe. Witnesses even reported seeing the power lines intact during the blaze, contradicting the official cause. For George, the wiring theory was not only false but part of a rushed explanation to silence doubts. He suspected the fire had been deliberately set as a distraction for something more sinister. Adding to the strangeness, the telephone line had been mysteriously cut that night. Investigators confirmed it had not burned in the fire but had been tampered with before the flames began. Without a phone, the Sodders could not call for help until it was far too late. This deliberate act convinced George that someone had planned the disaster in advance. The fire, he believed, was not an accident but a carefully staged crime. Neighbors recalled seeing unusual activity near the Sodder home before the fire. A man was spotted watching the children play only days earlier, his presence never explained. Another stranger reportedly asked about George's family, including how many children lived in the home. These eerie encounters later gained chilling significance when the children disappeared. To Jennie, they were no longer coincidences but ominous warnings ignored. Rumors of Mafia involvement surfaced, tied to George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini. George, an Italian immigrant, had clashed publicly with pro-Mussolini figures in Fayetteville. His fiery words against fascism may have earned him dangerous enemies. Locals speculated the children's disappearance was Mafia retaliation disguised as tragedy. The theory haunted the Sodders, who wondered if political anger had stolen their children. The Sodder family searched relentlessly for physical evidence of their lost 5. They sifted through ash, rubble, and earth for weeks, uncovering nothing of value. Each fruitless search deepened their conviction the children were alive, taken far from the fire. Jennie insisted she had seen faces in the smoke that night, fleeting but unforgettable. Her vision became both a comfort and a torment, feeding hope yet intensifying her grief. Authorities pressured the Sodders to accept official conclusions and move on. But George and Jennie could not. They refused to bury an empty grave for their missing children. The absence of remains kept the case alive in their hearts and in their fight for truth. To accept the children as dead would mean ignoring the unanswered questions surrounding their disappearance. The Sodders instead vowed to dedicate their lives to finding the truth. For the surviving children, life became a haunting cycle of mourning and suspicion. Sylvia, the youngest, grew up hearing endless theories about her siblings' fate. The missing 5 were never far from conversation, shaping her childhood and her identity. For Marion, who had seen her parents' anguish firsthand, the trauma was unbearable. The loss fractured the family, yet also bound them together in a shared quest for answers. The Sodders soon heard whispers from the community about strange sightings. Some neighbors claimed to see the missing children in passing cars on the night of the fire. Others insisted they spotted the siblings in nearby towns days later. Though unverified, these reports reignited hope that the children had not died. The Sodders clung to these rumors as lifelines in a sea of grief. The idea of kidnapping gained traction when no evidence of death emerged from the ashes. If the children had been taken, the fire was likely a cover-up to delay pursuit. The missing ladder and disabled coal trucks fit neatly into the abduction theory. Someone, George believed, had orchestrated the entire event to perfection. The Sodders were left not only grieving but trapped in a nightmare of unanswered questions. Jennie's grief turned to obsession as she replayed every detail of the night: the cut phone line, the strange noises on the roof, and the missing tools haunted her constantly. Each detail seemed like a deliberate step in a carefully executed plan. She convinced herself her children were alive somewhere, waiting to be found. This belief carried her through sleepless nights and endless sorrow. George grew bitter toward officials who dismissed his theories outright. He accused authorities of negligence at best, corruption at worst. Why had the fire been so poorly investigated? Why were potential witnesses ignored? To George, the lack of answers was itself proof of a cover-up. In the months following the fire, the Sodders continued to search relentlessly. They traveled across counties, following every rumor of children resembling their own. Leads took them to restaurants, hotels, and towns where witnesses claimed sightings. Each trip ended without confirmation, but their determination never wavered. They would not rest until they uncovered the truth. The missing 5 became more than a tragedy. They became a haunting legend. Locals spoke of the Sodder children in hushed tones, weaving myth into fact. The case entered local folklore as a story of loss, hope, and suspicion. Newspapers across America picked it up, branding it an unsolved national mystery. The Sodder family's agony was laid bare for the world to see. Decades later, researchers would revisit the case, debating whether the children truly perished. Skeptics argue they died in the blaze, but believers cite the lack of remains as undeniable proof. The case continues to divide opinion, long after the embers faded from the Sodder home. But for George and Jennie, there was never any doubt. Their children were taken. Hope kept them alive, even as grief consumed them. The disappearance of the 5 Sodder children remains one of America's most chilling mysteries. The lack of closure transformed their story into one of endless speculation and heartache. The Sodders' refusal to accept death became their life's defining struggle, and so Part 2 ends. Leading into Part 3, the strange sightings and eerie clues that deepened the mystery. For in the shadows of rumor and witness accounts, the missing children seemed to still be alive. As the weeks after the fire stretched in 2 months, strange clues began surfacing, each one deepening the Sodders' suspicions. The first major report came from a motorist who swore he saw children matching the Sodder 5 inside a passing car. This sighting occurred during the fire itself, suggesting the children were removed before. Flames consumed the house. Another witness claimed to see children looking frightened from the windows of a car speeding away that night. Though unverifiable, these testimonies aligned with Jennie's belief that her children had been kidnapped, not killed. A woman in Charleston later told police she served breakfast to 5 quiet children traveling with 2 adults. She remembered their uneasy glances and how they avoided eye contact as if under strict control. The children matched the descriptions of the missing Sodders, raising the family's hopes. Investigators dismissed the report as coincidence, leaving the parents outraged. To the Sodders, this was proof their children were alive and being hidden. A bus driver recalled seeing flames near the Sodder home that night, but also noticed suspicious figures in the area. He described people moving quickly, as though trying to leave before drawing attention. His testimony suggested arson was possible, not an accidental fire. Again, officials ignored the account, choosing to close the case rather than pursue leads. George and Jennie viewed this silence as deliberate obstruction of truth. Weeks after the fire, Jennie found strange objects in the yard near the ruins of her home. One resembled a rubber-like grenade casing, hinting that the fire may have started from an explosive device. This discovery aligned with her memory of hearing something thud on the roof before the flames began. Investigators offered no explanation for the object, deepening the mystery. For the Sodders, it was undeniable evidence that someone had set the fire intentionally. Rumors swirled through Fayetteville that strangers had been asking about the Sodder children weeks before Christmas. One man was reported approaching locals, asking where the Sodder family lived. His description matched an unknown figure spotted around town shortly before the fire. No one identified him, but his presence added weight. Two theories of a planned abduction. Locals grew divided, some convinced of conspiracy, others skeptical of speculation. Months later, Jennie received reports of children resembling her own in a boarding house across the state. She traveled immediately, desperate to see if it was true, but the lead fell apart before she arrived. Witnesses insisted the resemblance was uncanny, but the children had been moved before Jennie could confirm. Authorities offered no help in pursuing the sighting, calling it another dead end. Each disappointment cut deeply, but Jennie refused to surrender hope. Letters began arriving from strangers across the country claiming to have seen the children. Some described restaurants, others farms, others small towns where 5 children traveled together. Though unverifiable, the consistency of details across different letters kept hope alive. Jennie saved every report, filing them as evidence that her children lived. Her determination made the Sodder case a nationwide talking point. A woman in Florida reported seeing the Sodder children with Italian-speaking adults weeks after the fire. She recalled how the children seemed guarded, as if rehearsed not to speak freely. George investigated but found the trail gone by the time he arrived. Each journey drained the family's savings but kept their fight alive. To George, chasing leads was the only way to honor his missing 5. The most shocking clue arrived years later in the form of a mysterious photograph. Jennie opened her mail one morning to find a photo of a young man with no return address. On the back, scrawled words read, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Illal boys, a 90132 or 35. The boy in the photo bore a striking resemblance to Louis, one of the missing Sodder children. The cryptic note sent chills through the family, reigniting belief their children lived in hiding. Investigators refused to authenticate the photo, calling it a cruel hoax. But George and Jennie were convinced it was Louis, older but unmistakable. They displayed the photo on their billboard, hoping someone would recognize him. The message became one of the case's most enduring mysteries. Even today, researchers debate whether the photo was real or fabricated. Over the years, multiple people claimed to encounter the Sodder children in adulthood. Some insisted they had been raised under new identities far from West Virginia. Rumors suggested they had been adopted or hidden by relatives connected to organized crime. Though impossible to confirm, these stories echoed across decades. For the Sodders, they provided enough reason never to stop searching. Jennie collected clippings of every lead, creating a thick scrapbook of rumors, sightings, and theories. She studied them nightly, piecing together fragments like a detective solving a puzzle. Her scrapbook became the family's archive of hope and heartbreak. Visitors described her obsession as tragic yet admirable. To Jennie, it was survival proof she had not abandoned her children. George took a different approach, erecting a massive billboard along Route 16 in Fayetteville. It displayed photos of the missing children with the caption, "What was their fate?" The billboard stood for decades, seen by thousands of travelers each day. It became one of America's most famous cold case memorials. The sign kept the Sodder mystery alive in public consciousness. Locals debated whether the sightings were real or products of desperate grief. Some sympathized with George and Jennie, admiring their refusal to give up. Others dismissed the family's pursuit as denial of tragedy. The case divided the community for generations. Yet the billboard made forgetting impossible. Jennie described dreams where her missing children called out to her, begging not to be forgotten. She took these dreams as signs they were alive somewhere, waiting to return. Her faith in their survival became almost spiritual, guiding her daily life. Even skeptics admitted her devotion was unshakable. For Jennie, hope was stronger than grief. The Sodders' surviving children grew up hearing endless stories of clues and sightings. They too joined the search, following up leads as adults. Their lives were shaped by absence, their identities bound to the missing 5. For them, the case was not history but personal destiny. They became guardians of the mystery their parents began. Researchers argue the Sodder case persists because of these clues. Without them, it might have been dismissed as tragedy and forgotten. But each sighting, each photo, and each rumor kept it alive. The mystery thrived because answers were always possible but never proven. In this tension, the legend grew stronger, even decades later. Investigators revisited the photo of Louis, unable to prove its origin. Modern analysis suggests it could be authentic, but uncertainty remains. The photo's existence alone sustains belief that at least one child survived. It is both evidence and enigma, like the case itself. For the Sodders, it was the ultimate sign their children were out there. Strange clues and sightings made the Sodder case more than a fire, they made it a living legend. Each detail, from cars to diners to photographs, blurred the line between fact and hope. They transformed grief into an eternal search across decades and generations. By the early 1950s, the Sodder Children case had moved beyond tragedy into the realm of theories, speculation, and alleged cover-ups. With no remains found, no official answers, and multiple strange clues, the public demanded explanations for the impossible. Theories multiplied, ranging from organized crime, government negligence, insurance scams, and even paranormal intervention. Each theory offered fragments of logic but no complete resolution, leaving the case a maze of unanswered questions. For the Sodders, every theory mattered. Each was a possible path to their missing five. The first major theory was that the fire was deliberate arson tied to George Sodder's outspoken politics. George, an Italian immigrant, openly criticized Mussolini even after World War II, making enemies in immigrant circles. Some believed pro-Mussolini figures in the US targeted George by kidnapping his children as retribution. The timing of the fire and the suspicious events before it added fuel to this political revenge theory. For George, this explanation felt plausible as he remembered threats he had received in years prior. Another theory suggested the Sodder children were kidnapped and trafficked by organized crime. Witnesses reporting strange men watching the Sodder home supported the idea of a planned abduction. This theory claimed the fire was staged to conceal the kidnapping, destroying evidence of forced entry. Organized crime's presence in West Virginia during the 1940s added weight to the speculation. Skeptics, however, questioned how such a plot could be executed without leaving stronger evidence. Some believed the fire chief himself had hidden evidence of the children's fate. His bizarre claim of finding a heart in the ashes, later revealed to be a beef liver, fueled suspicions. Why would a fire chief plant such an item unless he sought to fabricate proof of death? The Sodders believed this deception pointed to complicity in a larger cover-up. The chief's vague and shifting statements left an aura of corruption hanging over the investigation. A more sinister theory held that local authorities colluded to suppress the truth. The failure of fire trucks to arrive in time despite calls was cited as suspicious. Officials' insistence on closing the case quickly raised eyebrows in the community. Families whispered about backroom deals and hush orders meant to silence deeper truths. For the Sodders, official resistance to reopen the case was proof enough of a cover-up. Insurance fraud was another theory, though one that deeply insulted the grieving family. Critics speculated George might have staged the fire for financial gain. But George rejected such claims, having spent every dollar searching for his children. His tireless pursuit of answers contradicted the notion of profit-driven motives. This theory faded with time, leaving stronger ones in its place. Paranormal enthusiasts proposed theories beyond human crime. Some argued the children were taken by mysterious forces tied to the lights often reported near the lakes. Others believed the case echoed legends of spirits stealing children from their homes. While fascinating, these theories lacked evidence and were often dismissed by mainstream researchers. Yet they added to the mystery's allure, turning the Sodder case into a paranormal legend. Another theory focused on child adoption under false identities. Some witnesses claimed the children were seen with new names and guardians far from West Virginia. This theory held that powerful groups orchestrated the kidnapping and relocated the children permanently. The strange photo of Louis years later gave this theory new life. If true, it meant the children had lived but under stolen identities. The Mafia connection remained a strong theory throughout the decades. West Virginia had ties to Italian-American crime networks during the 1940s. George's political statements and business dealings may have made him a target. If the Mafia was involved, kidnapping would have sent a chilling message. Yet no definitive link was ever proven between George's enemies and the fire. Some theorists claimed the Sodder children were taken overseas. They suggested political opponents arranged their abduction and relocation to Italy. This would explain why no trace was ever found in the US. The idea seemed far-fetched but appealed to those who saw an international dimension. For Jennie, distance did not matter. Alive anywhere was better than dead at home. The cover-up theory grew stronger as officials blocked further investigation. Authorities dismissed credible witnesses, refused to test evidence, and ignored new leads. George and Jennie interpreted this as intentional sabotage of their pursuit for truth. Public trust in the investigation eroded as rumors of corruption spread. The lack of transparency made even skeptics question the official version. Researchers later uncovered inconsistencies in the official fire report. The timeline of events did not match witness testimonies. The supposed cause of fire, faulty wiring, was contradicted by George's maintenance records. Neighbors swore the wiring had been checked and approved weeks earlier. These discrepancies reinforced suspicions of a fabricated explanation. Conspiracy theorists argued the case was buried to protect powerful people. They suggested those responsible had connections in government or law enforcement. The fire chief's actions, the police's silence, and the quick case closure supported this narrative. For many, the Sodder case became a symbol of authority hiding uncomfortable truths. To the Sodders, it was further reason to trust only themselves in the search. Jennie interpreted the absence of remains as deliberate removal. She believed officials had destroyed evidence to maintain the fire theory. Her experiments with chicken bones proved to her that the fire explanation was false. She told friends she was sure the truth had been covered up. Her persistence became legendary in Fayetteville. George clashed with investigators publicly, demanding accountability. He accused them of corruption and cowardice, refusing to accept their conclusions. His relentless voice made him both admired and criticized in the community. Some called him brave, others obsessive, but none could ignore him. He became the loudest advocate for the missing five. The billboard along Route 16 became central to the cover-up debate. Some argued it was evidence of desperation. Others saw it as a protest against official silence. The sign forced the public to remember, refusing to. The Sodder children case might have faded into history, but George and Jennie ensured their mystery lived on for decades. Refusing to accept official answers, they transformed their grief into one of the most relentless searches in U.S. history. In 1950, George erected a massive billboard along Route 16 near Fayetteville, demanding answers about the missing five. The sign displayed their names, ages, and faces alongside the chilling question, what was their fate? This billboard became one of the most iconic true crime symbols of the 20th century. Thousands of travelers passing through West Virginia saw the haunting images every year. The sign reminded motorists that 5 children had vanished on Christmas Eve without explanation. Newspapers photographed the billboard, amplifying its presence across the nation. It stood as both a memorial and a protest against official silence. For George and Jennie, it was a declaration that their fight for truth would never die. The billboard turned the Sodder case into a household conversation. Families across America debated whether the children were dead or alive. Theories resurfaced with every glance at the 5 faces staring from the roadside. The case became part of American folklore, passed down through generations. Travelers who saw the sign remembered it for the rest of their lives. For the Sodder family, the billboard was a daily reminder of both loss and hope. Neighbors considered it eerie, yet powerful, a symbol of persistence against silence. George maintained it. Year after year, updating photos and details as new leads arrived. Even as decades passed, the sign stood, weathered but unyielding. Its presence carved the Sodder case into cultural history. Jennie became known for her unwavering devotion to the missing children. She wore black for the rest of her life, mourning yet hopeful. Visitors described her home as filled with clippings, letters, and the photograph of Louise. Her obsession became legend, admired by some, pitied by others. To Jennie, it was not obsession but survival, her way of keeping her children alive. George traveled widely, chasing every possible lead, no matter how faint. He spent savings, time, and health searching for the truth. He confronted suspects, interrogated witnesses, and pushed investigators endlessly. His quest made him both respected and feared in Fayetteville. George carried the weight of 5 missing children until his death in 1969. After George's passing, Jennie continued the search alone, never giving up. She maintained the billboard, ensuring it stood tall against weather and time. To her, the sign was a lifeline, a way to keep her children's story alive. She lived until 1989, dying without closure but with unshaken belief. Her hope became part of the Sodder legacy. Their surviving children carried on the search after Jennie's death. They inherited not only grief but also determination to keep asking questions. For them, the case was not history but their family's daily reality. They promised to never let the missing 5 be forgotten. The mystery became a generational inheritance. Researchers revisited the Sodder case in documentaries and books. Each retelling reignited public fascination with the disappearance. The theories evolved, but the core question remained: what truly happened on Christmas Eve 1945? Even today, historians and true crime experts debate the possibilities. The case remains an unsolved puzzle etched into American history. The photograph of Louise continued to haunt investigators and family alike. If genuine, it was proof at least one child had survived into adulthood. If a hoax, it was a cruel reminder of the family's vulnerability. Its cryptic message added fuel to the legend of the case. The mystery of the photo is as enduring as the fire itself. Over the decades, the Sodder story spread into popular culture. It was retold in magazines, newspapers, radio, and later television documentaries. Each medium framed the case as one of America's strangest cold cases. The Sodder name became synonymous with loss and unanswered questions. Their story influenced how Americans understand missing persons mysteries. Paranormal researchers connected the Sodder disappearance to themes of abduction and cover-up. Some argued supernatural forces had played a role in the fire. Others linked the case to broader conspiracy theories of the post-war era. Skeptics dismissed these claims, but admitted the case remained puzzling. Even science could not fully close the gaps in evidence. The legacy of the Sodders lies not only in mystery but in resilience. They embodied determination to seek truth against impossible odds. Their story highlights the failure of authorities to provide closure. It also underscores how families can keep mysteries alive for generations. The Sodders' persistence made their case immortal. The billboard eventually came down, but its memory lingered. Locals remembered driving past it for decades, haunted by the images. Its absence only deepened nostalgia for the mystery it represented. Without it, the case felt quieter but never truly ended. Its shadow still stretches across Fayetteville to this day. Today, the Sodder case remains one of the most researched unsolved mysteries in U.S. history. It appears in books, documentaries, and countless online discussions. Internet sleuths continue debating clues, photographs, and theories. Social media ensures the case will never be forgotten. The mystery has entered the digital age, alive as ever. For many, the Sodder billboard is the most iconic image of the case. It symbolizes both the tragedy and the fight for answers. The sight of 5 faces frozen in time still chills those who see it. It represents a family's refusal to surrender to silence. It remains one of America's most haunting roadside memorials. The Sodder story also stands as a lesson about unanswered grief. Families denied closure become prisoners of mystery. The absence of truth is as painful as loss itself. The Sodders showed how love and hope can outlast generations. Their legacy is both heartbreaking and inspiring. The case remains unsolved, no remains ever found, no definitive answers given. Its endurance proves the power of mystery to outlast time. The Sodder children are still missing in memory, in history, and in questions. Their fate may never be known, but their story will never die. It stands among the greatest mysteries of American true crime. Today, true crime enthusiasts call it the cold case that Christmas never forgot. Historians label it an unsolved disappearance. Paranormal researchers call it abduction. But for the Sodders, it was always simple. Their children vanished and they deserved answers. And so Part 5 closes, leaving the Sodder case unresolved, eternal and forever haunting America. For on Christmas Eve, 5 children disappeared into fire and legend and were never seen again.